Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be reviewing my reads of 2024. This is quite exciting for me. I read 35 books, which I'm sure to like most people who are like avid readers, this sounds like a very low number. I'm just a slow reader and a very busy person. Combining all those things together means that I have a low reading goal, but I'm really proud of myself because that's more than I have read consistently in like a really long time, since I was probably in middle school. So I consider that a win. At the end, I will be telling you my favorite book of the year that I read. I read a lot of books that I just absolutely adored. And I'm like naturally a very high rater because like if I enjoyed it and I had a good time, like 5 stars. But I know which one I think is my favorite, even though I read a lot of fantastic books this year. Okay. So another preface, most of these I do not have in physical copy, or if I do, they're in my college apartment. So all of the ones that I have, you'll start to see a trend. The ones that I have in actual physical paperback are the ones that I read over the summer while I was home. So, or like the ones that I read while I was home on Christmas break, which is now. So you'll just notice like there's gonna be a lot of physical copies for like a segment of this video and then never again. So yeah, without further ado, these are all the books that I read in 2024. So the very first book I read this year was Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. I read this because I love hockey romances. I read the entire like the Deal off-campus series, whatever that is. They're just fun. I don't really like get that invested in them. I just find them fun. This one, however, I like did not like. The off-campus series I didn't like for specific reasons regarding like Elle Kennedy in general, and like also just like some of her writing was like not my favorite, but I enjoyed them overall because there was characters that I liked. This one I thought I would really enjoy because it got a lot of hype, and the hype seemed to like align with things that I would usually enjoy, and then there was just like a lot of things that I like did not like, and like I don't really care for her writing style. I ended up giving this one 3 stars, which is a little bit higher than I thought. It was fine. That's all I have to say. The next book I read was I Didn't Know I Needed This by Eli Rallo. I follow her on all her social medias. I think that she is great. I talked about this book a little bit on my TikTok, and I gave it 5 stars personally. However, she is very young to be giving the advice that she's giving. I think that it speaks to me because I'm younger than her and I was in college, so I felt like it was very warranted advice for the time in my life that I was in. However, I don't think that it's applicable to a mass audience like other really popular, widespread, memoiric, kind of self-help related books. That being said though, if you're a girl going into college or a girl in college, read this book because I really liked it. I felt like it really helped me in a lot of ways. But again, I am like very much the target demographic, target audience for this book, so. Next, I read The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. I actually read this book. This one is totally on my shelf, by the way. I just don't know why I can't find it. All of my shelves are also double stacked, so that could be why. I actually read this book for the first time in 6th grade. It was one of our required reading books, and I loved it. I adored it. I just have big series phobia, or at the time I really did. I still kind of do. I love standalone books or like duologies. I'm not really a huge like let's get invested for 15 books kind of person. I never have been. However, reading this book did a lot to me as a young 12-year-old, and the show was coming out or come out like in the previous year. I can't remember whenever it came out, but I was like, I need to go and actually officially read all these books because I'm audiobooking Harry Potter. Yeah, 5 stars. I loved it. It was so good. I'm continuing that trek in 2025. I'm nowhere near done. I'm reading them as I go. I'll read a couple of them at a time and then not pick them up for months. Which is to say, the next one I read was The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan, which is book number 2. I gave this one 5 stars as well. I really loved it. I thought that it was really just a great book. The next book I read this year was The Girls by Emma Cline. This one has been on my list for so very long, like so long. I adored it. It was one that I was like sure I was going to like and was like not surprised. It was like 5 stars, easy money. Next, I have a book that like pains me to say that it was not my favorite book of the year because I absolutely loved it and I think it is on my list of like favorite books of all time because it's so good, and that is What Happened to Ruthie Ramirez by Claire Jimenez. Her writing style and the way she chooses to tell the narrative is exactly the kind of story that I want to see more of. The voice is so rich, like each of the characters in this story has such a rich voice, and it was so cool to read and so just fun and heartwarming and heartbreaking and just all the things. It was just so good, and the writing and the prose was just beautiful. I will recommend this one to everyone ever. It is so easy to get into, but also equally one of the most beautiful reads that I've read. And I also had the chance to talk to Claire Jimenez. She just recently became a professor at my university, so there was like an open book festival that one of my professors does, and I went and listened to her speak. And I also love that aspect too. You get to learn more about the book. I could go on and on about how, like, the goodness of this book and how much it lives with me still. Like, read it. Read it. If you have not read it, put it on your 2025 TBR right now. I'm so serious. You will not regret it. The next book that I read was a book that I read for a YouTube video that has not gone up. And I wanted to go up eventually, but I just, like, haven't finished editing it. And it is A Nanny for the Cowboy by Roxanne Delaney. I almost didn't count this in my wrap-up, but then I remembered I did read it, so it should count. I didn't rate this. I had a great time reading it, though. It was so exactly what you think it would be. The next one I read was The Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan. Another 5 stars. Obviously, as you can see, I was under trend for a minute, and then I think the other ones were on hold, so I didn't read them, and so I didn't get back to them, and like, you know, all the things. So good, amazing, chef's kiss. Next, I read The Arc of Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. It actually came out in October. I've also ranted and raved about this book. Is that even the correct terminology? I've raved about it. I loved it. 5 stars. I've given a lot of like hefty 5 stars. I don't really know why. I guess this year was like a 5-star reads year. But Don't Let the Forest In is so good. It's like dark academia, some like body horror stuff that's like explored in a very YA sense and very digestible, but also very beautifully written. I loved it. I loved it. It's the perfect fall read. If you have not read it, add it to your TBR to read in the fall because you'll enjoy it. The next book I read was Betting on You by Lynn Painter, and I have to preface this because I read it at the same time as I was reading Funny Story by Emily Henry. And if you know anything about these two books, reading these together at the same time was not beneficial to either book. Unfortunately, I love Lynn Painter and I love Emily Henry. Both of them do romance in a way that I just really enjoy. The main characters and the main female leads are like very similar. Betting on You is YA and Funny Story is obviously adult, but their demeanors were just so similar. And to me, they even started to like look the same. I just like, I could not seem to separate them. I felt like the beats and the journeys that the main female lead went on was the same. And I think I just like got bored of reading the same story. However, that does not mean that I did not like either of them, but I gave them both 4 stars. The 4 stars for Funny Story was the lowest that I've ever given an Emily Henry book, and it purely was based off of that. I really enjoyed it otherwise. I felt like it was still really solid work. I love all her stuff. So I think that if I wouldn't have read them at the same time, things may have been different, but I did. So after I read both of those, I read Vicious by V.E. Schwab. Y'all, guys, I love this book. I loved it. I thought it was so good. I'm a huge V.E. Schwab fan. I read the whole like A Darker Shade of Magic series, and I love her. I'm not someone who reads a lot of fantasy. I think that fantasy is very hard for me to get into. The world building really stresses me out, but the way V.E. Schwab does it, it's more about the characters than it is about the world and all kinds of stuff like that and the relationships within them. And I love that, so I thought that obviously now is the time to read Vicious because I love those books and I've loved them for so long, and Vicious has been on my list forever. This one I love so much because of the like villainous origin story, like the superhero, super villainy underlying tones. I thought it was so good. The found family in here is beautiful. This one easily is like one of my favorite reads of all time. I think it's very good. And I'm just gonna share my review here because I think it's really funny. So this book club actually was between me, my mom, and her coworker. And we just never got around to discussing it, I guess. But I sent them both like different books, and this is one that they picked. This one I wanted to read for a while, so glad I got a chance to read it. It was fantastic. I gave it 4 stars. This was a very, like, the narration style was so good. It's so captivating. It was very Agatha Christie, very Knives Out vibes, with this, like, family aspect and then the mountains and all this stuff and murder, and I loved it. And there were so many things that were planted and paid off, and that is like a very good aspect to have with mysteries. I did have some of the details go a little bit over my head, and that is because I'm dumb. So there were some things that I just like could not, like at the end with the reveal, I was like, hey, don't know what you're talking about. However, it's not just me. I did see that other people felt the same way, but the story itself was really good and the writing was just peak. So next I read Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting. I gave this one 3 stars. I adored it. I thought it was so good. This one had been on my list for a very long time, and I was so happy that I finally like got it off my library hold to be able to read it. It did fall short for me in just the cadence of the whole story. It kind of dragged a little bit at some points, and I was anticipating it being a lot more like Anxious People by Frederick Bachman that I read last December and adored. And so I think my expectations were to be a little bit more like that, and it was a little bit more rudimentary than Anxious People / Frederick Bachman's writing. But I still loved it. I thought it was great. Loved the commentary on life, loved just all the different slew of characters. That's like my favorite kind of story to read. So, very good. Next, I finally read Vengeful. This is the duo / like second book, a part of the duology for the villains duology. I really like this one. I have problems with it because honestly, as probably most people say, this one could have just been a standalone easy and you did not need a second book. I did not like, what's this diva's name? Oh my god. Yeah. I did not like Marcella nearly enough to be following her throughout this damn book. These two, in this book, I loved them. I wanted more on their relationship. And they took a back seat in this book in a way that I was not anticipating, in a way that I didn't really like. It was good. It wasn't bad because you obviously still get to see them, but I just didn't like that it didn't focus on them. If you're going to do a duology, make it about the people from the first book. Don't like switch this up, because this feels more like a companion novel than it does a duology, and I wish that like it would be marketed as such, because they're not similar enough for them to like have like the covers and stuff emulate each other in a way that you would think it would be a duology. That was my biggest problem with it. Still a fun read. Still loved all that we saw from the characters in Vicious. I just didn't care about the new ones. Next, I read a book that's been sitting on my shelf for literal years. I've owned it since it came out. It does not even have the New York Times bestseller like reprint at all, which is like seriously saying something. It is Sadie by Courtney Summers. Y'all, I did a disservice to myself waiting to read this one. This is a beautiful book. It's not very long at all, so if you haven't read it, highly recommend. And I love the podcasting aspect, and I love just like hearing both sides of the narrative, like hearing Sadie's side and, you know, following that while you're also following this podcast where they're trying to figure out the things that like we kind of know, and it's really good. I think that it also covers a very like important topic, and I think that it does it in a way that's like really cool, especially discussing true crime podcasts and like the medium itself, I think, is great. I will say, I hate that I missed out on audiobooking this. I'm a huge audiobook girl, especially while I'm at school. As you'll see as we move through the things that I read in the fall, it's usually kind of the only thing I can finish because I don't have enough time to sit down and actively read something, but I can listen to something while I'm driving, while I'm walking, whatever. And I learned that this audiobook is a full cast with full sounds of the podcast, like it's fully recorded, because I feel like it would be a very fantastic audiobook experience. So if you're gonna read this, definitely do an audio version of it and let me know how you like it, and I'll cry, but whatever. Next, I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This has also been one that's been on my shelf for a while. I really liked it. It was just very sweet. I had it at a solid 4, but the ending, I think I ended up crying or something because I made it a 5. It was just very sweet. There were things that I felt like dragged a little bit, like pockets that dragged, or like plot points that I was like, okay, that's a little bit too cheesy for my liking. But overall, this was like a beautiful little rom-com. I kind of want to read the rest of them with her sisters because I just loved the vibes, and I felt like Talia Hibbert like can write romance very well and write rom-com very well. Next, I audiobooked The Housemaid by Frida McFadden while I was packing up all my stuff to go to college. I gave this a 3-star. I think that it was really entertaining because I could not stop listening to it. I like was listening to it all the time, which is exactly what you ask for in an audiobook, something that will just like keep your attention, especially because I was doing stuff like packing my room and packing my apartment and unloading everything and whatever and driving. I think that if you have a good audiobook, it makes you want to do those things more because you want to listen to the audiobook. Do you get my cyclical analogy? The next book was another audiobook. See, this is whenever we get into like the intense audiobook train. And that was Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. Oh my god. I loved this. One of my favorite things about audiobooks, and the reason why I do them sometimes also too, is whenever there is a memoir that is narrated by the person who wrote it. I think that that like makes it a unique reading experience, and that makes me want to listen to it more, which adds a whole separate layer that you wouldn't get if you're reading it yourself, right? This is another example of that, and I did not know hardly anything about like cooking and like the chef life, or even Anthony Bourdain for that matter, and I felt like I learned so much, and his voice is so witty and so gripping, and his visuals are very vivid. It was just very good. I loved it, I loved it, I loved it, and I kind of want to read another one of his memoirs just so I can like listen to the way he tells stories again. The next book I read, I hate that I don't have it here with me because the cover on Goodreads is fugly, but the next book that I read this year was Glaciers by Alexis M. Smith. I love this little guy. I love it. It's like not even 200 pages. I don't think it's even like over 150. So it's like thin little baby book. And I found this just from like walking through Barnes & Noble and looking at the shelves like a normal person. And I stumbled across it and I thought it was a beautiful cover, and I almost didn't buy it, and I was like, what the heck? And I did before I went to college. Brought it to college, decided I was gonna read it. And in like the opening, like establishing kind of like introduction, it talks about like that they hope that someone finds this in the way that I found the book, and I was like, oh my god. And the main character's birthday is like, I'm pretty sure it's the same day as mine. If not, it's the day before, but it's like roughly like the same day. It's just like, it was like just magical. It was magical, it was magical. The writing is so beautiful. And I loved it. I loved it. I could talk about this book forever. Next, I read A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen. Yeah, I can't even remember how to say it, but I think it's Henrik Ibsen. I read it for my theater class, and I read a lot of plays throughout the semester for my theater class, so those will start to pop up, but it really did open an entire new world for me, which is just like reading plays. I love performing, and I love plays whenever I read them to be in them, and I just haven't ever sat down to just read them to read them. I read A Doll's House. This is like classic. I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was very solid. I really enjoyed it. I don't think I have really anything negative. It just wasn't one that like pulled me in, like got my attention, like, you know what I mean? It was one that I like found to be really profound by the end, and I was like, okay, yeah, I like that. So that's why it's 3. Next, I read A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. So so, so good. I gave it 4 stars. It was magnificent. I loved it. And I would love to see a production of it. And I now want to read everything written by Tennessee Williams, which is like, again, more classic, very classic theater stuff. It's also one that if you have not read plays before, highly, 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 highly recommend reading Streetcar. I think it translates very well and bridges the gap between people who don't read plays and aren't theater people to like theater people and people who read plays. So next, I audiobooked the second book in a Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I audiobooked the first book last year, and I decided to audiobook the second one because I had it sitting in my Audible and was like, well, I'm gonna listen to it. And I really liked it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I really enjoyed the first book more, and I also, my own fault, but like there was a lot of things that I just like forgot because I hadn't read the book in literally a year that I like didn't remember how they played into like the plot until like halfway through, and I was like, oh, duh. Yeah, I do remember that now. So that's my own problem. I deal with that in my own time, but I do think that it may have affected my rating a little bit. But I really enjoyed it, and I'm probably gonna listen to the third one this year. So it'll be 3 years in the making of me listening to this series, but whatever. Next, I read another play from my class, and that was How I Learned to Drive by Paula Vogel. I did not rate this one. I think that it was just not one that I could really rate. It's just very subjective based on person, I think. I thought that it was like good. I like enjoyed it. It left me feeling gross and weird, and I think that's how it's supposed to make you feel in a lot of ways. And I enjoyed the analysis that we did on it in my class. I thought that that was like fun and cool, which is like my favorite thing about reading, is going to school for it and then perpetually being put in situations in classes where you have to read and then discuss it with a group of people. It's like almost like my favorite thing ever. So I really enjoyed that, but I could not rate this. I don't have a rating. I will never give it a rating. It was a play that I read that I have many like feelings on, and they are not on a good or bad scale. They're just like feelings. So next, I listened to the audiobook of Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. This was my first Gillian Flynn book. I hate to say that. It makes me like absolutely want to just like scream into a pillow and like die, because she's magnificent. And no, I haven't read Gone Girl, and no, I haven't read Sharp Objects, but those are on my list for this year. Okay, I'm getting there. Dark Places was fantastic. I was listening to this audiobook literally every second of every day until I finished it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was so wonderful. My mom had said that this was her favorite, so I was like, I'll listen to this one first. And the other two I want to read. Like, I want to read Gone Girl and I want to read Sharp Objects. Next, I rented this graphic novel because I wanted to read a graphic novel, and so I did. It's The Harrowing by Kristen Kiesling. I ended up giving this one 2 stars. I did not like it that much. I thought it was like fine. I thought it was like chill or whatever. I thought that the story pace was like super rushed for no reason, and we never got any depth on anybody, and it kind of just sat at this like very same level. And I read it in one sitting, so like that could have been part of it. Yeah, I felt like it just wasn't like detailed enough for me to like get invested into anything. Like there was a lot of like cool aspects, and then I was like, okay, and then we did not develop any of them anymore, and I was like, awesome. The next play I read was Good People by David Lindsay Arbert. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I would have killed to have actually seen this on stage. I think that this is probably a fantastic like on stage production. I hate that I haven't seen this live. I think it's really good, and I really enjoyed it. And again, the class discussion was fire. I really enjoyed it. Next, I read The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. Another one, like, don't look at me, please. Like, another one that literally everyone in the fucking world has read but me. But me, dude, but me. I got lent this by my lovely friend. I was like, oh, I haven't read this one. I was like looking at her shelf, and she's like, take it with you and read it and let me know what you think. I was like, okay, fine. And I read it and I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I felt like some of it was like very 2014, which like played into why I liked it and played into like parts of why I didn't. But I felt like the overarching like story itself is just, I love it. And a lot of people can talk about insta love and blah 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 blah. I don't care. I love things that are faded, and they like plant the faded aspects. I think that it was very cool and I liked it. So let me enjoy my whimsy and fun, okay? Next, I audiobooked Liliana's Invincible Summer, A Sister's Search for Justice by Christina Rivera Garza. And I think this was a Pulitzer Prize winner, which is why I read it, because I was reading it for a like book contest thing to win a free tote, but I found out about it in September, so I like was trying to read all these different things and I did not do it in time, which sucks because I wanted the tote really bad. So we're gonna do it in the spring and get that dang tote. I don't even care if I have to like drive back up to Columbia to get my tote. I'm doing it. But I just didn't have enough time. But this was one that I read for that. It was like about expanding, doing a broader bookshelf challenge, like expanding what you're reading, which is really freaking cool, and I really enjoyed all the prompts on there. This one I audiobooked, and I wish I would have actually sat down and read it because I think that a lot of it got lost in my translation of like driving places, and it wasn't a book that I thought I could audiobook it really well, and I don't think I did. I give this one in total 4 stars because it is truly like a beautifully written work. I think my problem was just with the way I chose to consume the story, because I got like characters' names confused and I couldn't remember who was doing what, and I went like long paces in between listening to it because I was not listening to it as frequently as I like thought I would for some reason. I think I was like just doing a lot of other stuff and like on a lot of phone calls while I was driving and whatever. So I don't think that I listened to it as consistently as it would have been to like make me enjoy it more. However, I would highly recommend this one if you would like to sit down and actively read it. Next, I read Wildfire by Hannah Grace. I thought I would really like this one. I was not going to give the Icebreakers series another chance because I didn't like the first one enough, and a lot of it had to hinge on like how she chose to tell the stories and the way she wrote the characters. I was like, I could give or take these. Like, I think there's other hockey romances now, like God we know, like there's a million out there now. So I was like, maybe I can find other ones that I think I'd like more. But then I was like, maybe I'd like this one because everyone was saying good things about Daydream, which I haven't read. But everyone was saying good things about Daydream, and I was like, I think I would really like Wildfire. Like, this sounds like something I would like. I did not like it. I skimmed probably the last like 30% of it. It dragged for me. I did not enjoy it. I felt like the smut was just so smut. There was just too much of it for me. Like, the smut for me has to be earned. You have to earn it. It has to be a reward. And I felt like this just wasn't in a lot of ways. Other ways I thought that was fine. I liked their romance. I just feel like you could replace a lot of the moments where they were doing steamy stuff with romance moments and make the like fewer steamy scenes more rewarding in that sense. Next, I ended up reading another play, and this was for my theater project that I did an entire like mock-up of like a whole like production for. It was Gloria by Brandon Jacobs Jenkins. I loved this. If you have not read a play, dude, read this play. It is so good. The direction it takes is so different than what you anticipate, and it is like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Give this one 5 stars. Obviously, because I was doing a very long project on it, I wanted it to be a play that I would really enjoy, and I hadn't read this one yet, but the subject matter seemed to be entertaining, and my professor was like, email me whenever you read the whole thing, because like, things get crazy. And he was right. Things got very crazy in a very unexpected direction. I would literally sell my left kidney to see this live. Like, I'm not even kidding. I think it would be so good on stage, dude. So good on stage. I love it. Next, I audiobooked If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I gave this one 5 stars. Loved it. I thought that it was a beautiful audiobook. I kind of wanted to have read it, but I didn't really have enough time to read it. I have read The Secret History. I read it last year, and I adored The Secret History, so I was like, if there was one way for me to enjoy The Secret History more, I think it would be if I understood what the fuck they were talking about. And ding ding ding, we have a winner. I understand what they're talking about with Shakespeare and with acting more so than I do with Greek. They're also a little bit more funny than our divas in The Secret History. Sometimes The Secret History takes itself a little bit too seriously, and this one I felt like they had like humor and like a little bit of joy and whimsy about them at times, and I thought that that was a really great and definitely needed addition to make it not only different from The Secret History, but to make it a little bit more real. Okay, we're nearing the end. Next, I read Flamer by Mike Curcado. I really loved this. This is a graphic novel that has been really hot on the banned books list, which is also like a part of something that I obviously really care about, which is the banning books issue and like very big like anti-banning books in schools and whatever and blah 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 blah, obviously all of the things. So I'm trying really hard to do more reading of banned books and books that are being really like talked about or, you know, confronted or questioned. Everybody needs to be reading banned books, and this one is such a good example of like, why are we taking it out of libraries? What's the reason? Some child could really see themselves in this book, and I think that that is sad that that opportunity is being taken away in a lot of aspects. My second to last book that I read this year is actually the one I just did my YouTube video on, and that is Meowie Christmas. I counted it because I read it. I don't have a star rating. It was just fun. No star rating. I don't have one. It's off the charts. I literally don't have one. But I read it, so it's on the list. And last but not least, my last book and my 35th book of the year is Nothing Like the Movies by Lynn Painter. Oh my god. Guys, we have to talk about it. Maybe I have a lot of conversation points to have about this one that I haven't had about the other ones because one, it would make the video way too long, but also two, I read them so long ago. I just remember vibes at this point. I'm not very good with plot points and or even names after I finish a book. Just like don't really keep track of those things, but I do keep track of vibes and like certain scenes. But all this to say, if you don't like this book, we need to be put in like a room together and the door is locked so that we can talk about it, because I adored this book. And if you don't like this book, you do not understand that people change. People are so dynamic, and the way that they go about the world post-heartbreak and the way that love changes people is so important, dude. It's so important. That like blows my mind that people are like, oh, well, like Liz isn't the same, blah 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 blah. I'm going to beat you with this, because are you the same? I don't think so. I felt like all of their arguments were so justifiable. I felt like I could totally see where he was coming from, where she was coming from. It made so much sense. It sounds like something that, like, arguments that I've had. Like, they were just, like, oh my god, dude. Nothing Like the Movies was fantastic, and I cried, dude. There were so many lines in this that were so perfect, and I just, like, I cried. I cried, and I cried, and I cried, which I usually don't do, and I don't know if it's because of the time in my life that I'm in, or because of the fact that I was reading this book at 2 in the morning. I'm not really sure, but they like broke me. And then they also made me feel so full of love that I just like kept crying. So like, I don't really know. Loved this. That is officially all of the books that I read in 2024. Wow. That's crazy. What a walk down memory lane for me. Mostly, not any of you, but for me, that was a walk down my memory lane about what my year looked like and what I read. My favorite book of the year, which I'm sure you probably could tell by the way I was talking about it, although I think I talked about a lot of these books with like just like so much passion, but my favorite book of the year, put in your guesses. My favorite book of the year was Glaciers by Alexis M. Smith. This book just is connected to me in a way that like feels like soul level, like universally, like connected, intertwined, like spiritually. That sounds dumb, but there's a lot of things that were mentioned in that book, like I was talking about before, that felt like that book needed to find me at the time that it found me, and I needed to read it at the time that I read it. Some of the lines in there, I just like, I will never get over. I will never, ever, ever get over. Okay. That completely wraps up everything. I hope you enjoyed. I know this video is kind of long, so it was just me being like, another book, 5 stars. Another book, 5 stars. Love this one, 5 stars. But I think that it's cool to see what people read. Hopefully this gives you some kind of idea about what to read in 2025 if you haven't read it already. And yeah, if you have any comments about any of these books, please leave them below. I would love to chat. I have thoughts about all of them. So one of the greatest things about reading is that it sparks conversation and intelligence, and we are in a reading drought right now. We're in an intellectual drought. Please read, continue to read, pick up a book, educate yourself on banning books, and learn something about people. You can learn so much about people through books, and if you don't believe that, then you haven't read enough. So, yeah. All right. I'll see you later. Bye.